two things I wanted to touch on. One is attribution. How do you know what can we track? And then I'll touch on speed to lead, I guess, a little bit after that. But it's harder now. We used to be able to see what keyword somebody typed in, and we could trace that all the way through call tracking and everything else to the case signed. And, with organic search, that's not really feasible anymore. But also, I think search behaviors change where people might be doing more research. You might have multiple touch points. So it depends on what attribution model you're going to use and how you're going to count it. But we can track phone calls. We can track live chats, text messages. So we have enough data to be able to say, like, hey, look, these are the numbers we're using, our Google business calls, we can come up with an ROI, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons that transparency is really, really important in any kind of relationship.
Both ways.
Exactly. Yes, both ways. That a firm, any relationship that firm has with, even if it's an in-house person, if it's an agency, having that transparency both ways where, anytime that I'm working with somebody, here's the data. I'll go into it with you. We use a tool called CallRail. We can go in and we can look at all of your phone calls. I can see what the source of that phone call is.
Yeah.
Hey, have you been doing a referral? You have a referral website that you're going through? Well, I can look in CallRail and see how many calls you've gotten from that
Sure.
referral source. And I can show it to you. And then on the law firm, I think it's important that you share with your agency, what's your average revenue for a case?
Yeah.
What are you making for an average case? How many of those cases do you need for this investment to be viable? And then if we have that information, the people that are working for you have so much, they're better equipped to do what needs to be done to get the results that you need.
You nailed it there. I mean, whether you're working internally and have your own SEO team or you hire an agency for digital marketing, whatever route you go, like, you need to have that transparency. And if you don't, I think that's kind of where relationships really falter. I think
That's where they break down.
Yeah, because you don't have that transparency. And so maybe one side thinks they're doing good, but the other side's, hiding that information. Yeah, that is, you wouldn't do that with your partner, right?
Yeah, and I think I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's tough for in-house because it is technically an employee, I guess. But when you're working with an agency, viewing them as a partner rather than another employee can make a world of difference in the experience and the results that you get.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so much easier to tie people to goals if talking that, and then you could clearly make an evaluation. This is working, or it's not working, right? And then
exactly.
Because the reality is, everybody, like, it's happened to me. I was like, hey, I want to go after this. This is our goal. This is how we're going to do it, and this is what we expect to happen. But maybe for whatever reason, it didn't work out that way, and we need to be able to have those. Every agency, anybody in an agency or in-house, need to be able to have those conversations with the stakeholders, like the good, the bad, the ugly, so that you can pivot and reach those goals. Keep that North Star, I think, in mind of what your SMART goal is, and always work towards that.
I think that's really important, yeah, and I think that you can see progress even if you're not. That's one of the big challenges that we face with the SEO aspect, particularly of that part of digital marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It can take a long time to see results,
not overnight,
to see dividends. So if you're working with somebody and you're in only the first or second month and you're expecting to see a big ROI already, I think that you need to kind of pump the brakes a little bit, and you need to take into account the fact that however long of spend is going to be recouped when you sign those first.
Well, it's an investment,
cases.
right? You're not going to put money in the stock market today and get 100% return tomorrow.
Precisely.
I think that's something that kind of goes overlooked sometimes. But to be fair, there's other things that can be going on. You could be competing, you could be participating in pay-per-click and SEO, and you could be getting leads, and you could still not be signing cases, even though we're tracking them all the way to there. And the thing that I wanted to touch on a bit earlier was speed to lead. Because one thing that I found is if people are not within that first minute, number one, some firms don't answer all of their calls. Number two, people sometimes get emails and it takes them hours or days or longer to respond, which is insane. People are shopping.
Or their emails don't come in and they don't say anything for a week.
Exactly. Yeah. Stuff like you've been there. You've seen all of that.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is the most successful firms actually have something else in common. And that is their speed to lead is quick. It's instantaneously. If you call, I answer. If you email, I respond under a minute, fast. But not only that, their intake is really dialed in. And I don't know if you've seen this or not. We've never talked about this, but an observation that I've had is when I work with firms that have a very solid intake process where they can sign a case, the actual intake person can sign that case without it going through the attorney and taking more time and more roadblocks, we see a higher percentage of closing. It's that speed thing. Have you experienced anything like that?
it is truly amazing how often I'll hear again, one of the SEO teams might come to me and say, "Hey, we have this client. They're ranking. They got 150 phone calls last month, and they tell me they're not really signing any cases." And my advice to the team lead, to the person running that account, is to really go listen to the phone calls.
Yeah.
And
that's our job. If we care
you
about
wouldn't
the
be
result.
amazed, but one might be amazed by the lack of answering of the phone, the calls that go missed, or they get answered by, answering machine or something like that in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Or they have an intake person who is not engaged, dismissive sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Or, sometimes not really through a fault of their own, but just not equipped to handle the phone call. And they might try to pass it on to an attorney. The attorney's busy. They're doing something. They're away somewhere.
Yeah.
That's a lost opportunity.
Sure.
Every time. And so I think it's extremely it's imperative to have your intake dialed in.
You got to dial that in.
Yep. Whether you need to hire
No
an
pun
answering
intended.
service to make sure that you're constantly answering the phone.
And then continually vet them, because sometimes
check in on them.
they suck.
Have people call in and report to it, and be involved with this process. It's never just like it's not Ronco, set it and forget it. It's never that. You have a script that they read. You have a script that your internal employees read. You go through that script with them for practice when they're not. This is something, a lot of times people are hiring somebody with little to no experience.
Sure.
They're answering the phone, so they might not be paying them a huge salary to do this, and then they're also not giving any training.
Yeah.
And they're kind of missing how vital that part of their business is. So you have somebody who is the first person who's talking to your potential clients, your potential customers.
My first experience with your company.
And you're treating them like they're kind of the lowest employee on the totem pole, maybe.
Yeah.
When really they're one of the most important employees.
Yeah, it's so important.
And, the more you can treat that person like they're important and invest in that person, the better your results are going to be long term. Like you said, eventually they're going to be that one signing a client for you before you even talk to them. And they're going to be coming to you and saying, "Hey, Mrs. Attorney, I have a meeting scheduled with a new client. They're coming in Monday," and it becomes a lot easier for you. Now you're suddenly not investing so much time and legwork into signing up that client because you've got people trained to do that.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm really good at learning lessons the hard way. And so, thinking about process, another thing that a lot of the most successful firms have in common is that process, the training that you talked about, but also that process for intake. I was talking to, Yanni Smith, the founder of Legal Intake Pros, about that as well, this very thing. And, it's just so key, but it is for some reason overlooked, where people think, hey, we need to dive right into marketing dollars, but maybe they don't have a marketing problem even. It could just be they have another problem, which is they're not, returning those calls fast enough or whatever.
Yeah. If you have, and granted, a lot of the phone calls that we end up tracking are going to be, it's another lawyer calling you. It's an insurance company looking for something. And those are going to get tracked. But in general, if I look at, and I see that you had 1,000 phone calls come in over a year from organic search, and then you tell me I signed one case, there's a problem with your intake system.
There is, absolutely.
There's something broken.
But those phone numbers should be different anyway, the one you hand out and email.
Sometimes what I see happening is people go
Google it.
So they're from they Google it, and that's how it comes from organic search. And they say, "No, I need to call him about this form. I Googled it. He came up on organic search. Now I called him, and that it'll track."
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a big complaint I hear too. If I'm talking to
that makes
attorney,
sense.
they'll say, "Oh, a lot of those calls are just existing clients, or they're this person, and they went through," and that's fair. But if the call volume's high enough, that doesn't matter.
No, that's true. Yeah.
I see plenty of firms that are hitting that 1,000 a year and more, and they're signing way more than one or two cases.